Good evening. Welcome to TIFF Bell Lightbox. My name is Lydia Ogwang, and I am a member of the coordinating of the programming team, here at TIFF Cinematech. And it is my distinct pleasure to welcome you to tonight's special event, Miriam Bale on Persona. Can you guys hear me okay? Okay, perfect. To begin, we would like to acknowledge that tonight's event is taking place on the treaty territory of the Mississaugas of the New Credit and the traditional territory of the Haudenosaunee, the Anishinaabe, and the Huron-Wendat. And we are very grateful indeed to have the opportunity to work in this community. On behalf of TIFF, I would like to thank our lead sponsor, Bell, our major sponsors, RBC, L'Oreal Paris, and Visa, and our public supporters, Ontario Creates and Canada Council for the Arts. As a charitable organization, we would also like to thank our donors and members for making TIFF's year-round programming and educational and community outreach initiatives possible. So tonight's event is presented as part of our centenary celebration of Ingmar Bergman, a series that was well received in London and New York City before landing right here in Toronto at TIFF. So sponsored by the Swedish Film Institute, the retrospective will present films from throughout Bergman's entire career, including, of course, his collaborations with Liv Ullmann, one of which we are about to watch today. So we'd like to extend a big thank you to the Swedish Film Institute and the Ingmar Bergman Foundation for their collaboration on this series. And we do want to note that the 35mm print of Persona that we're about to watch tonight is actually courtesy of TIFF's own film reference library, which is very exciting. Yay for the reference library. It's great. It's on the 4th floor. If you haven't visited before, you should definitely visit it. It's an amazing place to kind of take a look through film history. There are a ton of books there, and the librarians are very helpful if you do have some specific research that you need to do, so please check it out. The hours are online. We will be screening the film again for a full week-long run starting November 16th as well. So if you love it, you can come back. And the retrospective does continue all the way through December 23rd, so please come out for more Bergman. For more information on the remaining films to be screened, you can go to tiff.net/Bergman. So now it is my absolute pleasure to welcome you to our guest for the evening, Miriam Bale. Miriam is the artistic director at Indie Memphis Film Festival. She was previously a weekly film reviewer for the New York Daily News and the New York Times. Miriam has also written on film for the New Republic, Sight and Sound, W Magazine, and Filmmaker Magazine. And she's organized film programs at Anthology Film Archives, BAMcinématek, the Film Society of Lincoln Center, and the Yerba Buena Center for the Arts, among many other institutions. So please join me in welcoming Miriam Bale.
I want to thank Lydia and TIFF. This is actually my first time in Toronto, so I'm very grateful to be here. Yes. Toronto, I agree. And thanks to the tech team and to the management and the programming team. Everyone's been really wonderful to work with. And I'm a programmer, and even though I know this material intimately, this is not something I would have thought of, and I think it's really interesting programming. And I want to thank you all, too, for coming to a conversation and a context for this film, Persona, by Ingmar Bergman, that will put new context and even some criticism towards it. It's a beautiful film, and as you'll see by the end of the conversation, at the end of the intro, there's always something that I see new in this film, even though I always go in it with a little bit of trepidations and feminist lens criticism. It's an extraordinary film. I'm putting this film in the context of something that I, in 2011, called persona swap films. At that time, I noticed a thread among some films that I loved and that I noticed many women I knew loved. These films are Persona, obviously, Daisies, also from 1966, Performance from 1970, Celine and Julie Go Boating, Three Women, Freaky Friday, Desperately Seeking Susan, which is playing after this, and a beautiful 35mm print. Also, Single White Female, Mulholland Drive. These are all films that are about women, a relationship between women, where there's some sort of merging or swapping of identities. And there've been many films since, but I'm concentrating on the sort of peak period from 1966 to 2001, the late 20th century. Not a great time for women in film in general, for representation and for women directors, but a time, so these films are double-sided sword. Women are drawn to them, and at the same time, some of them are very male-authored. But at heart, they represent an experience of women friendship that I think is very unique. And part of that is its sort of magical tone. And so in order to bring you into this zone of these films, I'll start with an invocation, some of the dialogue from the film, and then we'll go into images. So first, the words. I don't know who I am. Now I'm in this dream place. Lower your voices. The child is resting. Stop. I'm having fun. Eye of lynx and wooden head, yeah. What do you mean? You're Rita. And now for the images. Again, these films are a friendship between two women, often a blonde and a brunette. I'm also just going to say a word of warning. These images happen to be squeezed, so they're going to be extra surreal in this presentation. So we'll get into a tight spot together. So they're often about two women, and a blonde and a brunette, or a redhead and a brunette. And here they are using, this is Celine and Julie Go Boating by Jacques Rivette. And I'll take a moment of silence to just see the connection between the images. As you can see, magic comes up, literally magic in all of these films. They have a recognizable, non-realist, dreamlike tone, yet they're never complete fantasy. They're always grounded in the realistic. They illuminate very specific aspects of relationships between women. They are all films about a distinctly feminine experience. They have, later on I'll talk about Performance is the only film I have that's about two men. And in that you'll see that they are feminized through wigs, makeup. It's very much about all roles being a performance, and particularly femininity being a performance. Where does this genre start? I'll start here. This is The Smiling Lieutenant by Ernst Lubitsch. This is not part of the genre. This is something close, but something different. In this, a blonde and a brunette do swap identities, but it doesn't have that dream horror. And I'd like to say that it has not only a dreamlike quality and a nightmarish quality, but there's always a sense of horror because it's always, in a way, about murder. When you take someone's identity, you're eliminating their identity, their existence in the world. And there's always that sense of sort of existential murder in these. But this is a romp, nothing nightmarish about this at all. And then a few other films like Girls About Town by George Cukor have that similar themes, but do not get to the genre. The genre doesn't really start. Oh dear. Well, that's okay. We can start here. Okay. The genre really gets going. The next image is from Gentlemen Prefer Blondes. And Gentlemen Prefer Blondes gets closer to the genre, and that's because it's a Howard Hawks film. And Howard Hawks films are often about gender and about swapping. There's often a role swap where a man will wear women's clothes or someone will take on another identity. And in Gentlemen Prefer Blondes, most of Howard Hawks' films are about men, a group of professionals, and there's a Hawksian woman. A Hawksian woman is sort of masculine. She takes control. She's a bit of a tomboy. There's the Lauren Bacalls. And in Gentlemen Prefer Blondes, we have Jane Russell and Marilyn Monroe. So the question is, in this Howard Hawks film with two women, who is the Hawksian woman? Well, it's obviously Jane Russell is the Hawksian woman. She's in this scene, is anyone here for love? She takes what she wants. She's the more masculine personality. And so then who is the professional? Marilyn Monroe is the professional. Marilyn Monroe is a professional woman. She is a professional at presenting her femininity literally for cash. She gets dollar signs in her eyes practically, and which is a fascinating role for her. And at one point, we have Jane Russell playing Marilyn Monroe. And this is when this genre really started to click for me about these roles, about the professionalism and femininity. And then we get into the next level is Vertigo. And that really gets into the dream stage, the horror, the existential murder. And this is about a blonde and a brunette, but not quite into the persona swap, but this gets very close. Then we get to persona. And once we're in persona, the real genre begins. And then you'll see after persona, since persona, there have been a million remakes of Persona, and you can see that the images get repeated again and again. And something that I'd like to point out that I hadn't noticed until preparing for this talk is while the images from Persona have been duplicated thousands of times, they've gone off, the core of Persona, one core of Persona, has gotten a little bit lost, and we'll get back to that. But these images you've seen a million times. Here we have performance, and with this merging, you can see this merging of the two men's faces of Mick Jagger and, I've just forgotten his name, and then what was his name? James Fox, thanks. And then Anita Pallenberg in the background. And this is, Anita Pallenberg is really sort of like controlling this merging between these men, and it's her femininity and there's even shots with her with a Super 8 camera. And then here it is, this is the famous merging of the two faces that you can see. Here it is duplicated 4 years later, where you're seeing the merging. Here it is, I think this is overlapped, and then this is half and half. And then here you see similar images playing with. So, so these images we see again and again. One thing that is interesting about Persona is that it is not a blonde and a brunette. These are two blondes. And one thing that Bergman was particularly drawn to, what inspired him for this, was the similarities between the two actresses. He had been working with Bibi Andersson, and then this is the first time he worked with Liv Oldman, whom some of you may have seen here last month, and he noticed the similarities between them. And so in that way, it's very different than the blonde and the brunette, than the people with the different hair colors, because it's from the male point of view. It's about these women being, in some ways, interchangeable. The next, moving on to the next cycle, from a very director's point of view, director working with actresses. While for the less male-oriented films, the blonde and the brunette, they become very much about opposite sides of the same. For instance, in Celine and Julie Goes Boating, Juliette Berthaud brought in her good friend Dominique Labourier to play Julie and to write the script together. They would wake up every morning and write their dreams. And she said, each of us is the other half of our divided and ambiguous selves. And in that way, the persona swap films for women, when they get the closest to the experience of female friendship, they're really about learning how to be a woman. They're sort of an apprenticeship of how to be a woman. You see someone who's another side of yourself, or who is the self that you aspire to. The Italian feminists in the 60s and 70s, particularly in the 70s, had something that they noticed the power dynamics between women in their feminist groups. And they, rather than ignore that and say, it's fine, all women get along, everything is great, and then ignoring that inevitably would cause conflicts, which often happens in women's groups, in feminist groups. They decided to kind of lean into it and to acknowledge these power dynamics, and that there was this dominant woman and that this other woman would be influenced by this woman. It was, as I said, an apprenticeship of how to be a woman, a way of learning to be a woman other than the mother. While in Bergman, it's very much a male point of view. Here we go with the wigs. The wigs are always key. And then, as you can see, the hairstyle, if you've seen Single White Female, the scariest point in the film is someone getting a haircut to look exactly like her. So the hair becomes very key. And this gets into, in Single White Female, one woman is the villain and the other woman is the victim. She's becoming that woman and the other woman is losing her identity. While in more recent films, this is Queen of Earth by Alex Ross Perry, it becomes more about a woman's, the villain is the woman's, the villain and the spectacle is a woman's capacity for madness. It's about a woman's madness going, always able to erupt. And in this, I chose this image because I think someone had compared it to a famous meme, Woman Alone with Salad. And in this, it's woman alone with salad becomes a horror. And it's about, and it's very much, I think also from a male point of view, about women and women's madness and women's friendship. While going back to Persona, it's very much, who is the villain in Persona? The villain in Persona is also a woman's capacity for madness. But from my point of view, that's maybe from the Bergman point of view. From my point of view, the villain or the overall view is the male point of view. We have, it's Bergman, this is the only wig scene in Persona. It's a shot of Liv Ullmann as an actress. And again, it's about his relationship as a director to his actresses. And the beginning of the film, it's not only about acting, it's about film itself. The beginning of the scene is about, the beginning of the film is a beautiful montage opening credits scene of literally film burning and of different images that you'll see, sometimes for a split second, many of darkness. And one of the key images is of a boy looking at women. To me, this is the key image of the film. It's of a boy looking at this through the screen at women. And this, to me, is Bergman's conception of film, of art, of men looking at women. And for many years, that was the conception of art. And so much so that that it's almost ridiculous how much he emphasizes this point. There's a carbon arc projector before you see the film burn up, and then right after, a split second, an erect penis. This is from the film. I didn't just make this up. I won't concentrate on it, but that's the level of subtlety. This is Bergman's conception of women and film, and of the image, and of the women's relationship to film. Yet at the same time, the film is able to do things that these other films haven't. I mentioned Queen of Earth. This is one direction that the genre has gone in. Another direction the genre has gone in is someone who is involved in these Italian feminist group meetings I mentioned, Elena Ferrante, and her Neapolitan novels. And that's an example of these themes in literature. And so we've got these tangents since Persona, the duplication of the key images. We have this other tangent of women making these films and getting closer to the horror and complexity and beauty of women's relationship with other women. And then we also have something in Persona that I haven't seen as duplicated. Essentially, if you go back to the essence of Persona, and far from all the springs that have come from it, you have back to the actress. And it's about lies and messiness, and which is closer to the truth, complete lies or complete messiness. And so I have to admit, it's still an extraordinary film, and I hope you enjoy it.